Today I want to welcome our speakers, Kevin Sawatsky and Robert Hall. They're going to be talking about something that I don't think I could ever do. They hiked the 500-mile Camino de Santiago Trail in northern Spain, and as part of one of their birthday explorations, and I'm sure they'll tell you all about that. They're going to talk about why they did this and what happened along the way, and he's got some really cool pictures to show you as well. And he'll also tell you a little bit about what the trail actually is and what it stands for. And okay. And in 2024, to give you an idea, there were about 500,000 people who actually did this trail. So that's awesome. That is, yeah, really cool. And maybe someday. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome them up.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
It's a clear, crisp winter morning for us to be doing this. Kind of nice to be inside doing that. My name is Kevin Sawatsky. I own a little real estate brokerage here in Greenville called Onward Texas Real Estate Advisors. And Robert Hall, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Robert Hall. My wife and I own Prairie Coffee downtown, Lofts on Lee, and have been here in Greenville for the last, our whole married life, so 38 years, 39 years now. And so this is very much home.
Renee, my wife, who's in the back, and I have been here since 2005, so although we are not originally Texans, we got here as quickly as we could, I think the same, and we came to Texas and found our people, and Robert was one of those, Robert and Sherry, and as you'll see, this was a trip that kind of came about for a number of reasons. The 6 participants in our trip were Robert down in the lower right, and above him is Steve Rosehart. Some of you from L3 may recognize the Rosehart name. He has a brother Doug who's out there as well. Steve and Robert and I and our lovely brides have been friends for 20 years, and we really just do a lot of life together. We've raised our kids together. We all have 4 kids. They're all kind of about the same age. The last one's finally getting one of the last ones, I guess. The youngest is finally getting married off this year. And so this process of doing things together started a long time ago. Over in this corner is my youngest daughter, or my younger daughter, Kinsley. She went for the entire trip with us as well. So there were 4 of us who did the entire trip from St. Jean all the way to Santiago de Compostela. Down in the lower right is my daughter Michaela, who joined us for about the last 2 weeks of the trip. That's the amount of time she could take off. And then next to her is Naomi Rosehart, Steve's eldest daughter, who joined us at the end of the trip as well. So we started off as a little band of 4, and we ended up as a little bigger band of 6, walking into the square in Santiago 35 days after we started hiking. This was really the beginning. We always like to say that, you know, life is really made up of your circle. And for people who don't have circles, you need to find one. And you need to figure out how to make that happen, because it's really easy, I think, for us as Americans in particular, to be isolated. You know, we've got monster TVs on our walls, we've got garage doors that go up and come down, and, you know, it's easy to kind of disappear from the world. But these are the people who are my circle. And so doing a trip like this was a very natural thing for us to do together. I want to talk a little bit about what the Camino is, because some people aren't familiar. The Camino is a 1,200-year-old pilgrimage that really extends across the north of Spain. We actually started just over the border in France, in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and walked all the way to Santiago de Compostela. Some people walk all the way to the ocean. If we would have had more time, we would have loved to do that. We actually took a day and went to the ocean, but we didn't walk that last part of it. So it's almost exactly 500 miles, and You know, how do you eat an elephant? You do it by starting with one bite at a time. And the same thing is true here. You kind of take it. And so you can kind of see where most people kind of stop along the way. It's about 15 or 20 miles a day. So this is the map that we understood before we went. Not too long before we left, this elevation map popped up in our research. And we live in North Texas, so we kind of assume everything has an elevation of about 4 feet. That was not true. There are 4 days really, where we had climbs of over 3,500 feet of elevation, in addition to the 15 miles that we walked that day. And I will tell you, you see Robert and me, we are not hiker shape. So Robert and I looked at each other and commiserated, because Steve is an athlete, he's a basketball player. I should tell you that my daughter is a hiker. In the last 4.5 years, she's hiked almost 9,000 miles. She's done Mexico to Canada twice, the Continental Divide and the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail from Maine to Georgia, or Georgia to Maine. So she is hiker shape. We are not, and so that scared the living daylights out of us. But we're here to say that it's possible
It is possible.
to do. Yeah. So up on the,
And to put this in perspective, when you see the ups and downs, and Kevin talked a little bit about here being flat, our practice hike, and this was our training hike, we did 10 miles on the Farmersville Trail. It is as flat as this concrete, 5 miles out and 5 miles back.
we thought we were good.
We thought we were good. We got here that first morning and came out of St. John and went, we're only going up 6 kilometers, something like that. It wasn't very far the first day. And there was questions whether we were going to make it the second day. And the second day was, it just goes on forever and ever and ever. And we'll have some pictures of it. It's just all up.
The symbol of the Camino is that scallop shell. That's been there all the way through, and you'll see some pictures later. You really don't need a map on the trail, because everywhere where you have a question about where you could possibly turn, someone has painted a stylized scallop shell and a big yellow arrow. So you literally could walk it without any kind of guidance or navigation tool. Over on the right, we did the trail that went across North Spain, of course, but all of these are a variety of possible trails, all called caminos. And the goal is to end up in Santiago de Compostela. Camino de Santiago means the way of St. James. And the cathedral that you end up is the St. James Cathedral in Santiago. Okay, so here's the question that we always get asked, why? And I'll let Robert tell you what his why was. My why was that my daughter sent me the book on the left, which sounded so innocent. Here's a business book of business principles that somebody learned while they walked this. Dad, I think you should read this book because you might enjoy it. I had never heard of the Camino. I'm not a hiker, but that started the process. Then we watched the movie. Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez made a movie in 2010 called The Way. Worthwhile movie if you get a chance to see it. It's a pretty good portrayal of kind of the feel of the trail. So we watched that and thought, well, if he can do it in the movie. Charlie Sheen is a doctor who just does it because he's mad about some things and does it with no training. So we looked at each other and said, well, I think we can do that. I turned 60 on our first day there. That was, we have had a tradition of doing birthdays, big birthdays together, just doing some kind of an adventure. So that was part of it. I spent my birthday on a patio overlooking Spain on the other side. We're actually in France. So not too bad a place to celebrate your 60th birthday. But another part of this was also 2021, I was in a motorcycle accident that spent a chunk of the year learning to walk again. So the fact that I could walk 5 miles, much less 500, truly is a miracle, and I will never ever see it as anything else. When people tell me I don't think miracles happen anymore, I can show them that picture and share that that's not the case. Kinsley is our hiker. She did it because anytime you ask her to go hike, she's gonna go do it. And then my elder daughter, Michaela, turned 30 on the trip. Why'd you do it?
I was asked. Because we've done life together for so long, we have done some really epic things on our aught birthdays, from 50 all the way through to 60s now. And I'm the last one to fall, so I don't know what I'll do in a year and a half, I suspect. Kevin asked, and I was like, well, yeah, of course, if you're gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. I'm not gonna let you have all the fun. And then it really started dawning, it started hitting me as what that meant. First of all, time away from a business that had been going on for about 18 months, 20 months at that time, and not just a little time. And that meant huge responsibility for my wife. So is that something that's worth investing in and saying, yes, this is something that needs to be done? Come to find out, it was exactly what needed to be done. And Sherry was gracious enough to give me the ability, allow me to be gone for 40 days, and she ran the business. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, and Renee did likewise. Renee did the same for me. Renee is not in the real estate world, but she jumped in and took over and handled our agents and handled my transactions. And it's amazing when you decide that you're going to do something that seems like it's impossible, taking 40 days off.
40 days.
And people gather around you and they help you do it. So don't say something's not possible.
There's one other I mean, Kevin asked, and of course, as I processed it, said, is this something that I would want to do? Yes, it is, of course. But there was a yearning in my heart as well for something epic. We all have, and I think as men, we read, several of us have read Wild at Heart and some of the John Eldridge books. There is a calling for men to do something bigger than themselves. I'm not getting any younger, and so I started looking at it, and I thought this would be that answer. And that's how I explained it to Sherry. I needed to do this, to say, I can do something that's really difficult and that not a lot of people do. It's worth it doing this type of things.
So preparation. We actually started looking at this maybe a year ahead of time, but when you actually finally pull a trigger, it's a lot closer to the time, and so then you start to try to figure out the details, the flights and what you carry. This is a trip where when you land, you're going to be carrying everything that you're going to use for the next 35 days with you. There are services, lots of people go and don't do that. There's a service who will take your luggage ahead. So we met people who every night were in fresh, clean clothes, different clothes every night. That must have been really nice. We pretty much each had a couple of shorts, a couple of shirts, a couple pair of underwear, a pair of sandals for in the shower, one pair of shoes, stuff, you see the gigantic bag of ibuprofen in the middle, passport, a few euros, but it's amazing when you start to say, for the next 6 weeks, what do I actually need to live? And all we needed was 15 pounds of stuff that you could stick in a backpack. And looking at this, I made the comment to Renee earlier today, a third of that I could have left at home. And we just don't think about that. That's not our world that we live in. We have all this stuff that we have to have. So anyway, that's literally all we carried. Yours was probably pretty similar to that. In fact, there's our backpacks. That's life for 6 weeks on the other side of the globe for us. And really it was a very good lesson to start out with. You want to tell them about our hike in Farmersville? You already mentioned it.
Yeah. It was a nice hike, nice and flat. Exactly a way to get ready for a up and down. And that is sort of how we went into the Camino. We really didn't know here from Sickle. We didn't have a clue about what we were about to partake in.
Better that way.
It was better that way.
Okay, so getting started. Tell us about our first day.
First day, we left the town we were in, where Kevin had mentioned about looking across to Spain, and took a courier. This is St. John. And this is the Pilgrim's office. This is where they get you started. And basically, they give you a passport. And at every one of the stops, you get a stamp in your passport. And so we had ended up with probably close to 75 or 80 different stamps. They're all unique. They're all very specific to the location. Some of them were hand-drawn and then turned into stamps. Some of them were wax. Some of them, but they were just, it was a fabulous catalog of the experience. They gave you a little bit of wisdom sitting on this, at this table. They said, you know, don't go left, go right. That's just,
What was the term?
left is death. That's how they described it.
Right through the Pyrenees.
Yeah, there was a lot of rain, a lot of mud, and a particular path was rather treacherous. I'll let you all guess which direction we went, because it was just a recommendation, right? We made the choice. So we were all here. There's Steve, Kinsley, and myself. Kevin was taking pictures, and this was as we were about to get started, so we thought. Because as we left here, we said, we got everything, we're going. We walked out, straight down the street, through the gate, and looked back and said, no, we didn't eat lunch. So we turned right around and went back and had lunch. So,
Yeah, this is going through that gate, and we literally, right after that, turned around and went and had pizza, thinking that, you know, we probably needed some energy. I took a picture of our shoes on the right. I have a picture at the end. You'll see how different they are. Shoes that have just walked 500 miles on a trail look a little different than they did at the beginning. But I have the picture on the right, number one, because it's a picture of the three of us, and there's just something about a trio of friends who get to do something together as you start an adventure. But it also gives you an idea of the just sheer beauty of what we experience. Very different terrain, but a lot of it looked exactly like that. Robert mentioned the passport. The passport was not just a touristy thing. We had to show it every time we went to a hostel, because only pilgrims can stay at the hostels. So if you were there in your car or on a motorcycle or doing something different, those are not available to you. And they're relatively inexpensive, maybe 9 to 15 euro a night per person, and you'll see what they look like. But that was such a part of that. And it creates camaraderie. If we're all pilgrims and we all stay in a hostel together, we have a different conversation than if we stay in a hotel together or an Airbnb. So this is kind of the very beginning of the trip. Santiago de Compostela is 790 kilometers away. And this is where it really sinks in. This is actually on our day 3, starting out day 3. But that is just a number that your brain cannot wrap itself around.
and that's after going up.
That's right, that's after that first day.
Go back to that. One thing that you find on the Camino is you have the opportunity to talk. And there's always a phrase that says the Camino will provide. The Camino will provide. This gentleman here, we've got 5 now. This gentleman here's name's Larry. Larry was an electrical engineer out of California who loves spreadsheets. Steve Rosehart is an electrical engineer out of Greenville who loves spreadsheets. We bumped into Larry at the beginning of day 2. We walked out of the Abergay. We walked about 200 yards up. Larry was coming all the way from St. John, so he was a little tuckered at that point, and we started talking with him. I think there's probably more pictures of him in your presentation. You will see him through the next 14 days or so. He, and we added one other that walked with us a lot. They're still friends. They're still connections. That was somebody that Steve needed, and we all needed. We all needed that Larry in our life for a little bit. He spoke pretty good Spanish. He had some experience there. And he just became part of our gang, if you will, as we walked along. And there were people all along the trail that were exactly like that. And so we'll show a picture here at the end that sort of summarizes it.
Okay, so hostels or albergues are where you stay. And I have to tell you that at the beginning of the trip, this was one of those things that I sort of anticipated was okay, I guess if we have to. You know, it's not realistic to go spend the money to do hotel rooms every night, so I guess we'll do it. It was absolutely one of my favorite parts of the trip. So I'm just going to kind of run through some pictures. This was our very first one, and you walk in and the couple spoke zero English, and we spoke zero French, and somehow we got checked in. We had a reservation, we got checked in. We had just the most incredible stay, and this was the night after my birthday, but we had a kind of a birthday celebration. Dinner was at a very long table. There were probably 25 of us at the table from Korea and Germany and the US and Canada, the Netherlands, and all strangers for a minute. And we certainly didn't end up dinner that way. And then, of course, that begins this parade of people that you run into constantly along the trip. This was our second night. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility, and probably maybe among the nicest that we stayed at, but there are 200 and some beds in that. They're divided into, I guess I'll have a picture later, they're divided into little cubes of 4. You know, this is all bunks. And then there's a bathroom and a shower down the hall, is the way it's set up. But we each had a little plug-in so we could charge our stuff. We had little lights. We had, in some places, a curtain that could be drawn. And then some places were very different than that. This was one of our kind of cool favorite ones. The albergue is on the right, but it's attached to this old chapel. And right across the hallway from our room, just like if this was our room and you'd walk out, right across the hall was a door with no label whatsoever. But it popped you right into the balcony of the chapel. And it was just a great place to sit and just be quiet for a minute and kind of wrap your head around the fact that we were now 6 or 8 days into the trip. Most of the albergues looked like this. You'd walk along a little street, there'd be a little door, and we had reservations before we got to each one. Some of those were only made a day or two ahead of time. But most of them, so you walked in and there was a host to greet you. The signs that were really, really prevalent were, number 1, Wi-Fi. Everyone's looking for Wi-Fi because you want to be able to communicate. Number 2, you notice the big yellow sign in the middle, because if you were hurting or you were just done walking, there were always taxis available. Remember, you're only going 15 miles a day, so you could literally be there in a few minutes if that's what you decided to do. That was always there. And then at the bottom is an advertisement for one of the luggage services that would take your luggage on to the next place. You want to tell about the shoes and the poles?
Yeah, we didn't know exactly what to expect, thank goodness for Kinsley. We walked in and she was like, I gotta take your shoes off. I said, what? I just walked 15 miles, I'm gonna take my shoes off here? It's very wise words, because otherwise you're sitting in a room with 30 other pairs of shoes, and that's what you're sleeping with. And
So smelling.
you didn't smell it. These cabinets were generally out in the hallway, down into another room. They were various locations, but they were a place that you put your shoes. So you would slide your shoes in there, you'd walk in, and that'd be the first thing you do. Leave your poles there just for ease. We never had an issue with anything disappearing, with somebody grabbing the wrong pair of shoes, anything of that nature. It was really pretty slick how it all worked. But we got very comfortable with doing that, putting our sandals on or flip-flops or whatever we had. And this is a pretty typical lodging. Just uncomfortable bunks. Sometimes they were comfortable, sometimes they were hot, sometimes you were froze to death. But they were just bunks.
When we checked in, most of the time they would give you a plastic bag with a paper sheet, paper-fitted sheet, and a paper pillowcase. And so you go in and the first thing you did was make your bed. And then in the morning before you left, you would take all of that off your bed and throw it in a trash can. So that was kind of the hygiene piece of it. And this was kind of the basic one, but this was much nicer. This is one that we actually had towels. Most of the time you had to use your own towel. We had, this was the only air conditioning
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
that we had the whole time. Most of the time there was no air conditioning. Another one, this one was cool. This was a barn that had been converted into a hostel. Those walls were every bit of 3.5 feet thick. And just an open window with a wooden shutter in it. And but there's a there's kind of a ritual. Everyone knows that by about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, half the people are sleeping already because most of the time you try to get up early and leave before the heat started. So people would be really careful of that. You're going into a couple of bathrooms that have showers in them, and that whole process of just being respectful of people around you. We really didn't have issues. We had a couple of places where it was blazing hot because we had days into the 90s, and with no air conditioning, being on second or third or fifth floor, good warm, but that was probably really the only issue that we had in the albergues.
How much were they per night?
Per person, kind of 9 to 15 euros, so 10 to 16 or 17 dollars per day. And the cool part is most of them had a breakfast and a dinner option. So you could choose to have dinner there, and then you could have breakfast in the morning. And all of them didn't have that. Sometimes we had to go find a restaurant. But we kind of chose that generally because it was fun to be with all these people that you're with, which is different than if you go to a restaurant and everyone from town is there. And you'll see a couple of pictures of those. You do laundry every day. Unless you have your luggage moved on to the next place, you got 2 pair of underwear, you're wearing one, you wash the other one, you dry it, and tomorrow morning those are dry and clean and ready to go. Yeah, you're hoping they're dry. Socks, shorts, shirts, all of that stuff. So every day we would check in, get our little package, go make our bed, go get a shower, and go do our laundry. And almost all of them had laundry tubs and lots and lots and lots of drying facilities. Manual drying facilities, and that's why Robert says, because if it's humid, you know what happens when you try to dry outside, and if it's drizzling, you know what happens, and so you may wear wet clothes tomorrow. Tell them about the lady on the right.
Yeah, we walked into this albergue, and they said, "Oh, we have laundry." I said, "Great, we'll go take our stuff and get it washed." And we all walked down there with our big pile of stuff, and we're getting ready to put it in the laundry. And the gentleman there who spoke broken English at best, and I don't know that she spoke English at all, was like, no, we'll do your laundry. And so they took all of our laundry, did it. We went out to eat, came back, it was folded and ready to go. And it was
6 euros for a load washed and dried.
It got all of ours done for $12.
And the hospitality we found over and over again was just amazing. And you think about that, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, a whole new herd of dirty, smelly, grumpy people come walking through your doors and are going to come and stay in your beds, and tomorrow morning they're going to leave you whatever they leave you. And to be smiley and hospitable with that is truly amazing. And that this has been hundreds of years that this has developed is really an amazing part of the trip. Okay, the path itself, I wanted to give you kind of a feel for what you're walking on. Obviously, stunningly beautiful almost everywhere we went. That part was a given, but the path itself was not always easy. This is kind of a go path going up the side of a mountain, and very pretty place to be. But you're just kind of hoping you can get there without twisting your ankle and having an issue the next day. Our very first day, which was going up through the Pyrenees, it was 40 degrees and pouring rain. And we didn't have long pants, we didn't have gloves, we didn't have jackets. So we just put on everything we had and walked through the mud. And we had, remember, that morning we started up with beautiful, clean shoes. It all ended by the end of that day. It was all over. This is a road, yeah, tell them about this, because this is your favorite part.
Yeah, this is the road down into Zaburi. Zaburi. And that is called the Dragon's Back, Dragon's Teeth, something of that nature. It's a rock formation, and rather than the rocks being laid this way, the rocks were laid this way. And so that trench, and this was really not the hardest part of it, but that trench was the path. And you can see me up on the, it's probably 2.5 foot, 3 foot deep there as you're walking. great area to get cut wide open, twist and angle. There's countless people that have been airlifted out of this area or out on four-wheelers. And they've actually, from what I've seen, they
Just went through and ground it
they-
all out.
they destroyed that. They came in and reworked it because they were having too many emergencies and care lifts. And so they ground it all up and packed it all down, and it's a not paved, but it's
It's a gravel road.
Yeah, it's a gravel road now, which is really, really sad after doing it.
After doing it.
Yeah.
Before we were like, no, we can't do this. We can't take another step on this, because you just couldn't find anywhere to put your
There was
feet.
no flat.
Yeah. Lots and lots of river crossings and lots of varieties of ways to do that. Sometimes coming into town, you'd be on this huge, big bridge going into town. And of course, every town in Spain, like a lot of Europe, the first thing you see is the spires of the cathedral. It's the tallest part of town. And then as you come into town, you come across a river. We did discover that there's a big difference between Europe and here that I had not contemplated. All of our towns in the United States, if you look at most of them, they're built where rivers cross or roads cross. You know, that's where the transportation junctions happen. But a lot of those are rivers. Rivers are always in valleys, so they tend to be low spots. In Europe, most of Europe developed at the point of castles. Castles are never built in a valley. They're always built on the highest point out there. So the end of almost every one of our days was a huge climb up to some town that had once been a castle, and you just don't think about that difference in the way that we have developed as a culture. But you go into the town. But anyway, lots of rivers, lots and lots of vineyards, lots of fields, lots of buildings sticking up like you can see over Robert's right-hand shoulder there, the red roofs. You look at this and you kind of think you took the pretty pictures, but literally, if you could see 35 days, you would see this scenery for 15 to 20 of those, is what we were walking through. If you look at the trail that's been ground down for 1,200 years, you see how far it is down below ground level. And you don't think about that until all of a sudden you realize that everything else is up there and you're all the way down here. It's eroded away. Some of the paths people had concreted in, so we had these beautiful wide concrete paths to walk, but most of it was gravel like you see here. This was, to me, the most surprising part of Spain. We were there, had we started even a week or two ahead of when we did, we would have been soaking wet for a week or two. They had the wettest, remember our spring this year? Remember how wet it was? All the ponds were overflowing. We just couldn't get rain to stop. They had the same thing. And so people who walked this in the early spring had just a miserable time. They couldn't dry clothes. Everything was just thick and wet. We got there, we had rain on day 2. We had a hailstorm during dinner one night, and we had a drizzle one morning, and the rest of our weather was spectacular. So that brought with it all these flowers, and every path along both sides, sometimes as far as you could see, was flowers. Huge fields of red poppies and daisies, and even the thistles, these big 8 and 10 foot tall thistles, but with huge purple flowers, and it was just color wherever you went. But again, a lot of gravel paths. A lot of times, think about where you walk. Most of us have never experienced walking from here to Denton. Think what you go through. You're going to walk on 380, so you're going to go through Farmersville, then you're going to go through Princeton, then you're going to go through McKinney. And think about walking through town for 4 hours. This process of being in a residential area, in an industrial area, and a downtown area, and sometimes not very nice areas, but you're the outsider and you're passing through, observing what you see. But this was what we saw most in all the little towns.
Spotlessly.
Immaculately clean, very quiet. Siestas during the afternoon, no one's out. So we were the only people out, otherwise town would literally be silent. You wouldn't see a person, you wouldn't see a car moving. Lots of vineyards. This is kind of what I described, walking into town sometimes over the river that had been the protection outside. I said before, you always saw these yellow arrows and the scallops. That's the stylized scallop symbol of the Camino. And so this is the first picture I showed you was 790 km. Now we're only 550 to go. We've gone 200 kilometers, and those became kind of exciting signs to see as they got smaller and smaller. But literally a little town in the middle of nowhere, and all the way through town you would see these monuments set up so that you really couldn't miss the opportunity. Tons and tons of murals. All these little towns with big gigantic barns and warehouses, and people had painted every kind of mural under the sun. Tons of scripture references. We were really kind of surprised. Obviously Spain is Roman Catholic in culture, but we kind of didn't expect that. But almost, I would say maybe 20 or 25% of the murals were scripture references or scripture passages, and then some were Albert Einstein. This is one of our very favorite pictures of the whole trip. This is maybe a third of the way in,
Probably.
somewhere, and we're actually going to stay in this little town. So we're really close, and we've been climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing all day, and you get to this bench, which is very appropriately located, and the three of us just kind of dreaming of our beds. But the scenery is just amazing. You don't want to miss it. Starting up early in the morning on a day that's going to be in the 90s, you don't want to be out in it if you don't have to. So if you can be done by lunch or 1 and beat it. So we had some mornings, 5 o'clock or 5:30, we'd be out walking. And that's sometimes what you have to see if you got up early enough. Sometimes, the Camino is divided into 3 sections. There's kind of a beginning section. The middle section is called the Meseta. And if you do any reading about the Meseta, they'll tell you it's just flat and boring and there's nothing there.
That's a lie.
It is a lie. But a lot of people will skip it. They'll take a bus across, or they'll take the opportunity to rent a bicycle and ride across it. Just something to make it go quick. A lot of it does look like this. You'll just do this for 10 days. And it doesn't have the scenery that the beginning and end do, but we found some really amazing places, and some of our favorite places to stay were on the Meseta. When you're hiking a trip like this, the thing you remember, well, Robert talked about the people. That's probably what you remember most. The second thing you remember is it's the only time in your life that you wake up in the morning, you pack your backpack, and all you have to do for the day is walk, eat, and talk. There is nothing else. There is no email coming in, there's no phone call coming in, there's no emergency. Everything is singular. And so you're incredibly hyper-focused on what it is that you're doing. And you have a lot of time like this by yourself, and then there's a lot of time where you're part of a big group and you're all talking. So you just don't know.
I'm talking, you talk about
Cities.
Yeah, we did go through several large cities, Pamplona, Leon, I can't think of the other ones, but there were, probably Burgos.
Burgos.
Burgos. There's several. And in each one of those cities, of course, you had the cathedrals, and they were all very, very unique in their own right. Leon, stained glass, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, Leon was the one with the stained glass. All of them had stained glass. What was amazing about this particular cathedral is it had 2,000 square meters of stained glass. And it was absolutely stunning. Many of these churches are, although they might have churches in them, they're more museums now, it seems. Still very much ran by the church, but very much you go in to see the artifacts and the relics of the old. All of them have these large plazas around. It's just absolutely stunning. And you can sit, generally there were cafes or what have you around, and we would sit and have a drink, have a snack, second breakfast, whatever the case may be, according to time of day, and move on to the next town.
So if you arrive at the town, noonish, 1 o'clock, what do you do for the rest of the day? Is it
Sleep.
sleep?
I mean,
Thank you, Dennis.
there were a couple of things that we would end up doing. We would generally check in if we could to get into where we were, our abrogate for that evening. Shower, take a nap, and then get up for supper. And we would eat dinner, we'd visit for a little while, we'd call home, talk to our wives, and we'd be, most of the time, I would bet, we were in bed by 8:30, 9 o'clock, unless there was some strangeness that happened around dinner. But yeah, it was, you were tuckered, you were tired. It was the end of the day at 4 o'clock, you were like, how much longer I got around here, when's supper? You know, Kevin made a comment about walking into big cities. This is a big city, and this took, you know, you had probably 2.5 hours walking into wherever we stayed this evening, or that day, and then you had another 2.5 hours walking out to the other side of the town. So you might have 4 to 5 hours, 6 hours in a city like this. I can't imagine walking through Dallas from city limit to city limit, and we did it through 6 major cities, and it was all unique, every one of them.
Lots of things for us to take pictures of. They obviously have figured out that people want to kind of take memories away. So lots of signs. You saw the one for Leon, the individual letters. That was a pretty common thing in a lot of cities. So we've got lots of pictures of us standing behind the letters of signs. But just continuing on with our path, yeah, it's not all easy, but I will tell you, we met people, the youngest was 2 years old, and the oldest was late 80s.
Late 80s. They've done it 5 times.
Yeah, we met an Australian couple who, this was her 8th Camino, his 7th, and they do it every year now. It takes them 4 months to do it, but they said for 4 months a year, we're just gonna spend it, and we're gonna walk it. Now we know everything, we know where to stay, it's very comfortable, we like the people, it's healthy for us, and he was the only one who had a battery-powered CPAP. The whole time it was the only CPAP we found in Albergate. But just this incredible people, lots of fathers and daughters, sons and fathers, 3 generations of people walking it together. And that age range was a real reminder that, you know, we kind of think that there's this age range of activity, and then after that, maybe you need to slow down. And maybe it's because they have the time, but there were a lot of people on this trail who were a lot older than we were. Samos, it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And we were fortunate to be there. Had we been there after, this summer they actually had fires. The trail was actually closed. Part of the trail was closed during the summer because of wildfires. So we were given the gift of being there at a perfect time. Lots of places where you're on mountaintops and you can look around, and this is a 360-degree view. And it's the only reason to be thankful you walked that trail. Because all the way up you were thinking, I just want to get to tomorrow. I just want to get to tomorrow.
And Kevin says all the way up, it's all the way down too. Because that down, that was going into the town that we were headed, it's not coming out of. That's a long ways, and that particular trail was probably one of the roughest that we were in. And it was incredibly brutal.
And most people don't know that the going down.
What?
I said, most people don't know that the going down actually hurts more.
Is every bit as tough as going up, no question. Yeah, this is Michaela. She got to a town, and all the towns have water somewhere that you can fill up, and this was one where the water came out of things that we could fill up and went into here, and she used it appropriately. Early morning start. Okay, places that we ate. So I said before that my favorite part of the trip was people. Robert echoed that we can look at people here, and I can tell you stories about these people that we literally only knew sometimes one day, sometimes over a few days. But we know things about their families that you would just never tell someone walking into a restaurant in Greenville, Texas. But because you're walking side by side, and you're on a pilgrimage, there is an openness to conversation that was very different than we normally experience in our lives. People's challenges, you always ask, why are you doing this? Some people were like, it's always just been a dream to do it. Some people would tell you, like a 30-year-old young lady from the Netherlands, I have an eye condition. By this time next year, I'm going to be blind, and I wanted to do it while I still could. Those are the kinds of stories. The couple sitting next to us here, this is their 4th summer. They can only do 30 days at a time, but they have walked from Amsterdam to here.
Whoa.
So, and they will finish up their very last leg next year. And so doing it as a couple adventure, I'm going to move along because I don't know what our timing is, but I would think we're getting close.
Stop a little bit.
Okay. This was one of our very first dinners. The young couple on the right had been together 10 years. To his credit, he carried a big, gigantic bottle of champagne up that goat trail, up that first day as part of his pack, so that they could celebrate their anniversary that night. The guy sitting next to them at the end is a young 22-year-old from Italy who hikes because he loves to smoke. And he said, so if I hike enough, I can justify smoking. It's just the weirdest things you hear from people, but all this time sitting, the 2 ladies over on this side, down in the corner, and Crystal, are from Switzerland. They live half their year in Switzerland, half their year in Paris. We asked them how you can do this. They do adventures every year, and they said, well, our husbands are kings. And so the first night we met them, they never said a word. It was at dinner one night, and we were kind of thinking, you're kind of standoffish and you probably don't speak English. They became some of our very favorite people along the trip because the more we got to know them and we ran into them at dinner and we stayed at the same places, we got this incredible perspective of living in Europe in particular, but in Switzerland. And Crystal's daughter came and hiked with us for a week. She works with Doctors Without Borders. She'd just come from 6 months in Chad working as an admin for some doctors there. And so you just hear all of these experiences, and it's every day for 35 days that you get to do that. So you're so excited when you sit at a cafe and somebody you know comes over the hill and sits down and you're there for an hour, and then you finally have to leave, and then they decide to leave anyway because you want to all be together, that kind of camaraderie. Cafes everywhere of all different shapes and sizes. This family, this was a Sunday night in Spain. Good luck trying to find anything on a Sunday, much less food. But this place opened up for us and cooked us dinner. There's nobody else at this restaurant. It's a mother and a daughter. It was their restaurant. They just happened to be there. And they made us this big dinner because we were hungry.
We were pretty grateful for pub food.
We would have taken anything. Lots of, Robert said second breakfast. Yeah, first breakfast, second breakfast, sometimes a third breakfast.
If we were lucky.
You couldn't possibly eat enough to not burn it off. You burned everything you ate. So you really could have fun eating. That was one of the byproducts. This was a part, we went along this path, and somebody at this farm, those are fig trees behind you, I'm sorry, olive trees. They had made all these little sandwiches, and they were just out with a little donation box. And so, great place to stay, get a little bit of water, you could buy an orange juice. This is kind of a neat story. The couple here were missionaries in Croatia for 30 years, and now come and spend a few weeks at a time at this food truck, and they are just there. They obviously they sell food, but they're there to have conversation with people. And they say, you wouldn't believe how many times someone who speaks Croatian is so surprised to find someone who can speak to them. They'll be here for hours, and we get to talk, and we get to interact. The food was amazing. That's one of my fish from that night. Chocolate became Steve's favorite thing. We ate a lot of chocolate ice cream. Whenever we could, ice cream was a part of it. Robert?
Yeah, this was one of the, it was an incredible night. Young lady in the orange, when we talk about hospitality, Steve actually ran to this abrege. I mean, he finished 20 minutes, an hour before us, to get to this particular abrege. It was brand new, had high ratings, and Steve, like I said, was all about Google reviews and things of that nature. So he got us this lodging. It was absolutely fabulous. The lady with the glasses, she did everything. She smiled, she welcomed you in, she made sure you had a drink, she made sure you had your room, she made sure your laundry, you had it. She was just incredible. With a smile on her face. And it didn't matter if she was talking to an American, if she was talking to a German, or talking to a Spaniard. She was pleasant. And we decided to have dinner at the abrege that evening, and it was by far one of the best meals we had had the whole trip. And the lady standing next to her was the one that actually cooked it. And I walked up after it was over and I said, guys, I just need to tell you, this meal was unbelievable. It was just perfect. This is where it hailed, and it was just an incredible evening. And I turned to the cook because doing what we do now, I know how important it is for people to hear feedback. And I turned to the cook, her, and I said, she didn't speak any English, not a word. And so we translated it back and forth between the three of us. But the smiles captured every bit of it. They were just a delight and just a refreshment for the soul as you were walked in and you were so exhausted from the walk. And it's just the way everybody was that we dealt with.
Big long tables, eating together. Next to Kinsley is someone who had to translate for the person next to Steve because he didn't speak any English, but she was from Croatia, I think,
Yeah.
and she spoke Croat, so she could interpret all the way through dinner for us. How do you make that happen?
So you didn't use Google Translate?
Lots of people did, and we did as sometimes, but we didn't really need it as much as we thought. Hand signals, man, you can talk a lot with your hands.
In that environment, somebody spoke the language that you were trying to communicate through. And so it really was pretty amazing. There was never a time that we felt, oh, we're at a loss here because there's nobody we can talk to.
Go talk about that salad.
This is, when you get there, they have a salad called ensalada mixta. For us, that's just a mixed salad, right? It is a mixed salad, but it's always the same. It is always tuna and olives and tomatoes and oil and vinegar and white asparagus, and it became my favorite. And I ate more salads in Spain than I've eaten the whole, 59.9 years prior to that. And but it just, number one, you're hungry. You're always hungry, and that's just part of it. But part of it was we really, really enjoyed and were blessed by the food. Lots of statues along the way, and of course, every once in a while you try to be funny. Okay, so are there negatives? Everything I've shown you so far makes you want to just run and go, right? Because I've told you, anyone in this room could walk this, no question. Unfortunately, there are some negatives. Kinsley became our nurse, and Robert and I suffered from some significant blisters. And, it's not like you can just not walk the next day. That's how you get. We actually ended up, there were 2 days that Kinsley and Steve walked, and we took a bus or a taxi ahead, just because we had to have a break, a day off of those.
Underball.
Well, you know what, there are lots and lots of things. The problem is, once it's there, now you just got to deal with it. So Kinsley would lance it, we would treat it, and we'd get up the next morning and walk. I said before, the people, and I'm not going to belabor this because I could be here all afternoon telling you stories, but all these groups, Larry's the person in the middle in the back, Tanya is from Australia. She actually ended up, she had already booked to bicycle across the Meseta, so she left us before that, but we met her on day 3 and she hiked with us, so it was really the 6 of us with 2 people we'd never met before, but you can talk all day long when you're doing something communally together. But the couple at the end, you want to tell them about Mark and Emma?
Well, they're a British couple. They were actually walking, they do different adventures every year for fundraisers. And they are very benevolent back in England and raise funds for various different things. He was military, she was actually a hairdresser. Have 2 dogs and a daughter. Absolutely wonderful couple that we are friends with still. We still communicate via Facebook and Messenger quite often. Emma was one of those people, I was hurting terribly the last week. She was worn out. She was tired too. And I had encouraged her at some point about 2 weeks prior to us being finished. And so that last week, we'd cross paths. Robert, you can do it. We're going to make it a little further this way today. And she just this ball of energy. And there were times I don't know that I would have finished without Mark and Emma around. I would have, but it would have been maybe a little more even begrudgingly. Kevin mentioned knowing things about people that you don't necessarily know. We know exactly where Mark has a Pepe Le Pew
and his girlfriend tattoos. And you can't see them in this picture. So here's another thing though you learn. On the path, you walk up to someone, you say, "Hi, I'm Kevin," introduce yourself, why are you walking? You don't know if you're talking to a janitor or a CEO. Because you all look the same. You all smell the same. You all look worn out. You all are dusty and tired. This is a couple who, when we first met them, they sent their luggage on each night. So they always were very nicely dressed. Every evening going out, they were well dressed. And we were like, well, this is obviously one of those couples. He is a one-man plumber HVAC company, and she's a hairdresser. And they have just decided, like Robert said, that they wanted to raise funds. And so every year they do an adventure, they have all their friends and clients fund an account, and they give it away. And they're just a perfect example of how we had a perception of who we were talking to, and it was just not that at all. And you saw that over and over again. This is the young lady I mentioned from the Netherlands. Crazy to think that as a 30-year-old, you're going to lose your sight. But she was happy and cheerful and would talk about anything that you wanted to talk about and share with you. This family, this is a family from Utah. Dad's in IT, mom's a stay-at-home mom. She's also an engineer though. They carried their 2-year-old and took their 4-year-old, and though they did not complete as fast as we did, they completed the Camino this summer. They would walk as far as the 4-year-old would make it a day, typically 5 to 8 miles. Most of us, thinking about a 4-year-old, would say we would never make a 4-year-old walk 5 to 8 miles. She was having so much fun. They decided to do this. He took 4 months off because they felt that the formative years of their kids were that 0 to 5. And she said, we're missing it. It is all going by too fast. We need to do something. So they did this trip and committed what most of us would call brain damage time of trying to corral these two and carry not only the kid, but another 20 pounds or 25 pounds of gear. He had the biggest pack I ever saw, and mom did too, and then walking along, and just those stories. This is a father and a daughter that we met, so we took pictures since we were father and daughter. I'm going to move quickly here, but the guy on the right is a Dane who bought an albergue and was by far the best host we ever had. After dinner, he came up to me and he said, "Steve really wants ice cream, doesn't he?" And I said, "Yeah, he does, because he asked you." And he said, "We don't have ice cream here in town, but I've got an idea." And so we jumped in his little van and we went 5 kilometers to the next town where we could buy ice cream and brought it back for Steve that night. And it was because he decided he could do that. And that was after cooking and cleaning and serving all day for this whole place. Ice cream. Yeah. This is a pastor from Phoenix who lost his wife in September last year, his wife of 37 years. His church told him to go ahead and take a sabbatical. And so he's doing a number of things. He was hiking this and then spending a week with each of his 2 sons as part of a sabbatical experience. just a really amazing story, and I can share that at some point if you want to hear it. This is that dinner, you saw the young lady in orange, this was that dinner. The guy at the end, thick Scottish accent and is from Germany, but grew up in Scotland. I want to share just a couple of Camino-specific things. About 2/3 of the way in, about 350 Iron Cross. And you learn about this as you prepare. And what people do is they bring typically a stone from home and carry it all the way to that point. And the reason is you're leaving something there. As you move on, you're leaving something from your past that you don't want to have. So we all brought a stone. Steve had something written on his. I didn't write on mine. But
Robert got his at Whataburger on the
Robert
way
got
to
his
the
at
airport.
Whataburger. But you see
Cranberry.
the stones all the way through here. People don't only leave stones. Jim, the pastor that I showed in a picture before, left his wife's favorite necklace at the foot of the cross in his kind of symbol of saying, okay, I've gone through my grieving, time to move on. This guy in the middle, his name's Stefan, he's from Brussels. Stefan didn't have a backpack, he had this cart. And we kind of were like, you know what, if you just pack a little better, you don't have to bring a cart, you can carry it on your back. And never really knew, but you see those rocks, he carried 6 of them, 350 miles.
Oh my gosh.
And he had had his priest at home write in Latin 6 paragraphs of things. He had just retired that year. He said, there are some things that I just no longer want in my life. I told my priest, I had him write it out in Latin. When we left him, he was at the foot of the cross, cross-legged, transcribing from his piece of paper with a Sharpie onto each of those rocks, each of those 6 things to leave there at the bottom. And it's those kinds of stories you just can't forget. You'll see a picture of him at the end. Okay, so I want to make sure we're not taking more time than we need to. You eventually get to the end. You've done this for 35 days. And partway into the morning of that last day, you get to a point on a hill that you can look across and you can see the 2 spires of the cathedral in Santiago. And this is what you've been working for. There are people around you passing. You're walking into this big city. But you see that, and it's a very unfamiliar feeling. Because most of us don't do something, only that thing, for 35 days, and you get to the end of it. So you walk in, and the way you get to this big plaza outside the cathedral is down these steps through a tunnel. And there is a group that every 2 hours changes out who plays the bagpipes. They do it from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They play 2 hours of bagpipe each. And so you walk down this tunnel, down these steps, into this echoey tunnel, bagpipe music playing, and you come out into this huge plaza. You could have 10,000 people out there. It's absolutely enormous. And you get to take a picture in front of the spires that you've seen for all your planning and all the way through. But then all the people who have been with you start coming through as well. Robert.
Yeah, this is the Camino. This right here. And I'll get through it without getting emotional.
No, you won't.
The 2 French Swiss ladies are here and here. They called us, they finished the day before we did, and they said, text us when you're about a kilometer out. We want to be in the plaza cheering y'all in. So Kevin's talked a little bit about the tunnel. We came through the tunnel, and it is an emotional moment to walk through that tunnel and to hear everything that's going on. And there they are, cheering us, taking pictures,
And Corey.
calling us in. I mean, they're pulling us to that point. I didn't realize how special those 2 ladies would be in that story until after I started recounting it. Stefan, this is his cart. He just happened to finish about the same time we did. This is a couple from France that had walked with us. We had walked in and out of their lives for 35 days. A young man was who took our picture, I believe, was from Kosovo or someplace, and he had hitchhiked to get to France to walk the distance, and he had made the entire trip. We're all different walks of life. We're all different economic status. We all walked for different reasons. But we're here celebrating that we accomplished a task that was really too hard for any of us to do on our own. This is one of the most overpowering pictures that I have of the Camino. It is that strong.
On the right is our passport with all of those stamps. And so we can go back and we can see each place we stayed, many of the cafes that we were in, lots of the cathedrals, because they all have a stamp. And you end up with a certificate. If you have walked at least the last 100 kilometers or a total of 100 continuous kilometers on the trip verified by your stamps, you get a certificate at the end. And that's, you think that's what you're working for, but I haven't really even looked at mine since I got back. The pictures are a lot more fun. Our shoes look a lot different at the end of the trip, and just a memory of every one of those miles. We showed this at Rotary last. We found a picture of Rotary. We did go all the way to the ocean. Steve and Robert and I took a bus trip out there. It's called Finisterre, which is the end of the world. It's the furthest west point in Europe. And so you get to be at that point, and that's actually mile 0 for a lot of people. And then we came home and had a little bit of a delay, but we made it home, and that's the end of our story.
There is one thing I'll close with. In life you do a lot of things, right? We Caminos and what have you. This had to be one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, bar none. Everything that's hard is worth doing. And that is something that as I've come home and I've started recounting and thinking about this and relating it to the other things that I've done in my life. Starting the business. Was that easy? It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. So was this. Family. Is that easy? Not always. That's very, very difficult. The things that are difficult, the things that are hard are worth doing. And that's one of the things I want to make sure that my kids understand. My kids are married, have kids now, but my kids and grandkids understand that it's not the easy things that are worth doing. It's the hard things that are worth doing. And Camino helped make that pointed message to me.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope we haven't held you over, but it's always fun to tell the story, and as you can tell, we literally could talk for hours and hours.
About anything, not just
Robert and I share that gift. But I would challenge you to think through things that you think are just outside reach sometimes. I know it's comfortable to travel a particular way. Try doing something different. I know some places are, there's some places we automatically would love to go. We'd all love to sunbathe on the Riviera. But maybe hiking in Nepal is an experience that will pull you and stretch you in ways. So do some of that, but do it with your circle. There's just nothing like that. And if you don't have a circle, find one. So anyway, thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any questions from anybody?
What month did you go?
We left May 19th and we were back June 25th.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so, it doesn't seem like it's very long, but every day, especially when you're away from family. And for two of us, we had businesses that we left, and you're trying to figure out that piece. But beautiful time of year to go. Like I said, people later in the year had trouble with heat and fires. People before that had trouble with wet and cold. And so we were truly blessed.
Yes. Would you do it again?
Yeah, go for it.
I told the guys when we left the airport, I've said I've done it 2 times, the first and the last. I got home, Sherry and I were on the way, because our wives all picked us up separate, right? And Sherry and I were on the way home, and I just told her, I said, sweetheart, I said, I tell you what, we need to do Lisbon to Santiago. She looked at me like I was crazy, and I still haven't convinced her. But it took a 12-hour, I don't know, 8-hour flight, 9-hour flight to get from Spain here, and I was already starting to talk about the next trip. So I would do something like it again.
My passion is long distance motorcycling. A few years ago, I got to ride all 49 states in 10 days. It's the kind of trip, 11,000 miles in 10 days. I would love to motorcycle Spain. This did not convert me into being a hiker. I'm still not hiker shape, but I will tell you, if you get to spend 40 days straight with your daughter, that is an experience you will never, ever forget. And so, great experience doing it with my 2 best friends, but I had the other layer of doing it with my daughter and having that connection, and that you just never get to do with your adult children. So, I'd love to do something. If it's hiking, I'm not so sure.
Awesome.
One practical thing here, just, there were a lot of remote areas, so are there outhouses? I mean, what about that?
No.
Well, don't forget, you're literally in towns every 4 or 5 miles, so you're in several towns a day. So you have that opportunity if you can hold it. It's a challenge because there's nothing in between. And so there are a lot of people, you'll see a little head bobbing through the wheat over off the trail, or some people didn't even take much to get off the trail. But yeah, it's one of the weird things you think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're so used to, we just pull into McDonald's or a rest area or something.
Cool, awesome. Well, January, we don't do a program, but we do have our reception in January. Y'all are welcome to come. It's the 3rd Thursday in January, that evening. And everybody have a great Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.